Welcome back to day 3 of our CEO's Declutter Should Do's workshop series. You are here, right? I was just saying, I know that so many of us have a lot of other things that would love to get our attention right now. And so while the world is out there that keeps chasing the clock and their to-do list and listen to all those voices and all the noise that's around them, you're pushing pause, whether you're on live or whether you're watching the replay, to listen to his voice. And I really want you to hear his voice even over mine, right? Because it's more about who he has called us to be and what he's called us to do than what anyone else tells us or tells us we should do. So because you're here and you're prioritizing that, that tells me that you know you're called and that you want to be faithful and fruitful, right? Anyone want to be faithful and fruitful, right? And not keep spinning your wheels and busyness, the hamster wheel, doing all the things that everyone else says you should, because that's just costing us time, resources, energy, right? And we have little to nothing to show for it when we get to the end of it all. We just are exhausted. So instead, we're quieting those voices, right? We're turning those off. It's been a really different experience this week. I've intentionally, up until the time that you and I have been coming together at 12 o'clock my time, I haven't been listening to anything else, just to the Lord and just to my time with him and what he's putting in my spirit. And it's been really interesting to have the quiet and be okay with the quiet. Because I think sometimes we like to fill every space with something, right? I mean, how many of us go on walks and we take the podcast or even the music? And those aren't always bad things, but sometimes we need to be quiet so that God can just speak into us. Because what does he tell us? He's like, come to me, all of you who are heavy and weary and heavy laden, right? We talked about this the other day, and I will give you rest. When we take his way of carrying life on us together with him, his yoke is easy and his burden is light. And he invites us to lighten our should-do load, right? That we've been carrying for too long. Who wants a lighter load? If you're here on live, drop light in the chat. Yeah, or raise your hand or, whatever. Like, who would like a lighter load, right? Who would like their should-do list to be a little bit lighter today? Well, hopefully you're starting to feel a little bit lighter. When we were together on day 1, we were unloading the burdens of our wrong beliefs, our untrue beliefs around who we are and what we're called to. The world tells us a lot of things, but that's not necessarily what is true. Yesterday, we unloaded the burden of all the things we think or we're told that we should do. And your CEO implementation action step, if you were with us yesterday, if you weren't, it's okay, just listen, and then you can go back and listen to the replay. The easiest place to find the replays is either in your inbox if you're already getting emails from me, or inside the Redeem Her Time community. I have posted them and tagged them up at the very top to make them easy to find. So here was our action step from yesterday. Declare one task that you will delete because it's not yours to do in this season. AKA, it's not your CEO task. And remember, we said this may look different for all of us based on the season of life we're in, based on the season of business we're in. So if you didn't do that inside the community and you want to drop that in the chat now, that would be great. As I was looking through the ones that were in the community, I noticed some of you were like literally crossing something off. Several of them were around social media presence and how often you're there and how often you're doing things, right? Somebody even talked about cleaning out a closet that had been on their list. And they're like, you know what, right now, this just doesn't need my time and attention because other things are more important, right? Some of you talked about stepping down from roles and responsibilities. Like that could be a really big thing, right? That maybe you've been serving in a capacity and it's been good for a season, but now your time and attention needs to go somewhere else, right? Some of us are just like not really sure what to take off. It all feels like it matters. It all feels like it matters equally. And so we're wondering, is there anything that I can? And so I want to encourage you to kind of keep your spirit, open, your radar up for the things that come across your path. Are they invitations from him, or are they distractions from the world or the enemy or just ourselves or whatever that's going to get us off track? Right. So we want to be watching out for that. Somebody even shared, I love this, that God unexpectedly cleared something from her plate to create space. Like she didn't go in and do that, but God did that. And maybe he's got something else to fill that space, or maybe it's just supposed to be some white space. Permission to have white space in your life and in your calendar. Okay, inside of the Redeem Midlife CEO program, we talk about Selah and Sabbath, right? The pauses that we should be having in our calendar so that we're not trying to fill every single thing. So I want to share real quickly what it is that one thing that I am deleting recently. I shared this on a podcast last week because it's related to the podcast, and that is going down to one episode a week. it wasn't that I'd been told I had to do 2 a week, but I was watching people who had the success that I wanted. And because not just because I want more numbers, but I want to be able to, reach more hearts with the truth that God has through Redeem Her Time. And so I just decided I needed to then do two each week as well. And so I've been keeping up that pace, and it's been like about a year and a half that I've been doing that. And I just really sensed in the past like month or so that God was saying, Lissa, your time and attention needs to go somewhere else. So not that it's completely going off my list, but that it's going down to one. And then that time I was putting into that second one and everything that involved can now get poured into working on some client projects, working directly with new clients, working on the Redeem Her Time planner that is coming out, Lord willing, the next few months. So other things that were needing my time and attention. So I'm going to encourage you to always be looking and saying, is this something that really matters? And does it matter as much as everything else? And does it matter right now, right? Because if we keep putting everything on the same level, either out of expectation or obligation or simply distraction, we're just going to be running in circles chasing our should-do list, right? So pay attention. What is your best yes CEO task? We talked about the best yes yesterday. Who's read The Best Yes by Lisa TerKeurst, right? Such a great book to remind us we don't have to say yes to everything. And when we do say yes to something, whether it's something someone is asking of us or just us saying yes by giving our time to something, it could be as seemingly innocent as, as picking up our phone, right? Is this my best yes right now? Is this what's giving my best time and attention to what matters and is going to move me in the right direction? So permission to slow down your yes and think about it first. Permission to unyes if you have said yes to things in the past that are not yours in this season, and permission to just say no. You don't have to say yes just because you can or because someone thinks that you should. So I'm curious, right? As you think about where you're at in this season of your life and business, what is the best yes for you in this season? So those of you who are on live, drop that in the chat. I'd love to hear that. And let me kind of catch up on what's been going over here. Yeah, working social media is a no for me right now. Okay, yep. So because it's heading to socializing. I deleted an appointment today because there was literally no white space. Okay, yes, right? Like how often are we able to say and willing to say there's just too much right now? I'm going to ask, we're going to need to reschedule. And that's okay. That's a beautiful thing. So good for you in doing that. Anyone else have a best yes that you've either given recently or you need to give? Drop that in the chat. Because as we're doing that, that's how we're paying attention to what things are getting our yes, right? And what things aren't. So I read this morning when I was in my morning refill time with the Lord. It was a quote by Tony Evans, and he said this: God will meet you where you are in order to take you where he wants you to go. God will meet you where you are in order to take you where he wants you to go. And I thought, wow, a couple things stood out to me. Number one, am I turning off the noise of everywhere that everyone else wants me to go? Or even the voice inside of me, right? That's putting all these expectations and things like that out in front of where it is that I should be going, right? Am I turning off that noise and pausing the doing so that I can actually hear his voice? And then am I paying attention to where it is that he's leading, right? Instead of just trying all the things and going in a bunch of different directions and having all the randomness, like, am I really listening in that time with him? And am I then following the direction that he is leading, or off on my own, right? We talked about that the other day. So as we have this priority of meeting with him, it builds that CEO confidence, which builds our belief, which builds our clarity in our task, what tasks to do and not do. And then it's going to do what we were talking about today, having consistency in where our CEO focus. Who here could use a little bit more consistency and focus, right? I mean, I think we're squirrel brain all day long, and we've got these extra appendages, AKA our devices, that are dinging, ringing, and pinging at us all day and night if we let them. And there are a lot of things that are trying to get our attention. And so we have to be discerning about what that looks like. But that always starts with going to him. So let's stop and pray before we go any further that he is going to meet us where we are today, and that we will listen and then we will follow. So Lord, we just thank you that you meet us where we are. And you are patient with us when we run off on our own. And when we come back to you and sit again at your feet, and you are faithful to show us your way and to show us what you have for us and what you've called us to and the bigger purpose behind it all and what you've given us with each day that you've put in front of us. And so I pray that we will turn off the other voices right now, the physical ones as well as the internal ones. I pray that we will tune into your voice, to what it is that you're saying to us, and that we will then with you move forward in obedience and action. And I thank you for each woman who's on here live today, for those who are listening to the replay, and just pray that your voice will be what comes out loud and clear. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Well, I'm so glad that you're here. Yes, someone asked if I can share the Tony Evans quote in the chat or in the community. I will. Here, let me just copy it and put it in the chat for those of you who are on here right now. And yes, I will definitely put that in the community, which is a great actually segue into, have you popped into the Redeem Her Time community? Because that's where we take things off of Zoom, off of a podcast, off of just a post, and we actually have real live conversation. And we're talking about our challenges and our struggles and the things that we're facing and what decisions we're needing to make and where God is leading and where we're seeing his hand move and things like that. And so that really helps us grow. It's also where we're posting our CEO implementation action item each day. So that way we're being consistent and accountable to taking action. So if you're not already in the community, I invite you to come join us at redeemhertime.com/community. If you're already a member, then you probably know how you best find it, whether it's via the app or via your laptop, but that's where we're hanging out off of Zoom and off of the podcast or wherever you're hearing this, or on YouTube and things like that. So a couple of announcements before we dive into today's content. Yes, today is day 3, which is the last day of a 3-day workshop. We've covered the who, we've covered the what, and today we're covering the when. But I want you to know it doesn't mean that we're done, because what I found is, for myself and for so many women that I've worked with, it's not just the information that we need. Hopefully, yes, you are grabbing some nuggets as you're listening to each one of these sessions, and there is some new things that you're thinking about. But wouldn't you agree that most of our issue is not in the information gathering, it's in the implementation doing, right? We can know a lot of things, but are we doing them? And not only are we doing them, are we doing them with consistency, right? That's going to make the biggest difference. So I'm offering 2 group bonus sessions to help specifically with the implementation piece. Now that we're going to know the who, the what, the when, okay, how do I actually do something with this instead of it getting buried on my desk or being one more thing on my to-do list? So tomorrow, Friday, April 12th, same time, 12 o'clock Central, we are doing a CEO open house focused on connection. Why CEOs, especially entre and solopreneurs, don't do business alone. Because it's really easy to get distracted and to start listening to all those other voices and then start chasing our should-dos. And God showed me something really cool in scripture as I was preparing for this workshop series, because I was thinking, wouldn't it be nice if we actually could hear his voice saying, Lissa, Suzanne, Chesney, Kimberly, like, go this way, right? And we were like, if he would just say that. And yet he actually does. But the problem is that we keep chasing all these other things and looking to all these other places and listening to all these other voices. And he does tell us, like, I will tell you whether you should turn to the right or to the left. So I can't wait to show you what is possible and what he promises when we listen to his voice instead of running to all of those around us. So we'll dive into that tomorrow, and how the children of Israel did or did not do that. And you're also going to get to hear from some in real life CEOs who are part of the Redeem Midlife CEO program. We're plugging into a place where they are being intentional with that implementation. And so you're going to really see how that helps, not just trying to DIY things, right? And hoping that you'll stay focused and remember and all of that, but really helps exponentially grow what it is that you're doing. So that's happening tomorrow on Friday. And then on Saturday morning, it's just going to be a really casual, laid back, bring your questions and your coffee, show up in your comfies so you can still be in your pajamas with your messy bun if you want to be. I'm not going to be dressed looking like a CEO anymore at that point. So come as you are, and we are going to look at, okay, what do I do next? Where is the best place for me to be investing my time and what I've learned this week? So again, it's not just head knowledge, right? But it's something that's actually starting to flesh out in our life and in our business. I specifically made that for a Saturday morning because I know there are some of you who haven't been able to join lives during the week. And so hopefully a Saturday morning, you can sneak away for just a little bit and we can work on that. And then you can get right back to whatever you're doing. So that session is not going to be recorded because it's kind of one of those things you have to be in the room, right? It's about what you need and about you getting that level of support and those types of things. So if you do have a question and you are not able to join us on Saturday, I will put a post in the community where you can ask your question ahead and say, I can't be there, but here's my question, or here's my challenge, or here's where I'm needing some direction. And then I will make sure to directly address that and make sure that you get the answer to that as well. Okay. So it'll be the same Zoom for all of those. Who here needs more implementation and information, right? Implementation, or write me or whatever in the chat, right? Like, we need to make sure we're doing something with what is going on. Last thing, if you want some more individual attention and you want my eyes on your calendar, there are still a few more of the CEO Find the Time audit spots. I opened a few more up for next week because I didn't have time this week to do all of them along with all the workshops. So this is a way we look at where your time is going and where it should be going, where it is that God is calling you to focus, and what small shifts, what small swaps I'm going to give you can start shifting things so that your time and attention is going in the direction that's going to take you in the right direction, and you're not going to feel like you're spinning your wheels. So that's just a quick 15-minute, you and I together, looking at where you are right now and where it is that you're heading next. So if you haven't grabbed a time yet, let me grab the link for that, because I did make sure I made that available. Hold on, you need this whole thing. And I'll drop this in the chat. Otherwise, you can find it inside the community when you pop in there. Okay. All right. So we're going to jump into our calendars and do a quick review in case those of you who are just jumping on today have not been here or listened to all of day 1 and day 2. So grab your workbook. If you don't have a workbook in front of you, that's okay. Just you can grab pen and paper. For those of you who are on live, I will also drop the link to the workbook in the chat, so that way you can click on it, and sometimes it's nice to have it in front of you. Okay, day 1 was confidence in who you are as a CEO. Our problem is we have too much on our should-do list, but the real problem is it's because we're listening to all these other voices that are telling us all these other things that we should be and do, right? And we keep doing that. We keep looking at all the should-dos. We are eclipsing the did-dos and the will-dos and the things that God is doing in us and through us and what he's calling us to. And then what do? We get caught in the trap, comparing, doubting, achieving, right? We're trying to make up for this gap that we see between where we are and where we think that we should be, right? Which leads us to believing untrue belief number 1, I am not enough. Anyone ever said that or thought some version of that, right? I don't have what it takes. I'm not enough. I don't know enough. Whatever that is, right? I don't have enough certifications or training or time or experience or expertise. Where's that going to take us? Just either round and round trying to chase being enough in our doing, or going, well, then I guess I'm out, right? Like, why bother, right? And we don't want to do either of those. But God says that you are enough because he is more than enough, right? And if he has called us to this business as a CEO, reminder, CEO in my world is defined a Christ-empowered operator of a with God life and business, which means we're not doing it on our own, and we're not doing it just for our own purposes. There is a much bigger purpose behind it. And we have, someone with us that knows way more and can make way more happen than we can on our own, which is why that daily CEO meeting and using that CEO tool of the STEER belief map is so important, because our number 1 CEO task is building the belief in who he says we are as a CEO. Okay, so day 1 was all about growing that CEO belief in who we are and starting to believe I am enough, but not because of my resume, right? Because of his resume. Okay, so day 2 was clarity on what to do or not do as a CEO. Because who, even the last 24 hours, got several different demands or distractions or questions coming in an inbox, coming in a chat, coming through a voice, whether it was one that was right next to you or something that was, across the country or across town. We have a lot of different things that are asking for our attention. We talked about the Skittles and the oranges. You can see my Skittles and oranges sitting behind me again today, right? And we can fill our days with so many Skittles because it tends to be what is the most urgent or the squeakiest gets our attention, right? And so we're just, reacting all day long, right? But if we're doing a lot of random things at random times for random reasons, are we going to end up at the destination? Right? Remember our road trip analogy from yesterday? Like, if I keep taking random turns, I'm just going to go in circles. I'm going to waste a lot of time. I'm going to waste a lot of gas. I'm not going to get where I want to be. My family's going to be frustrated with me, all the things, right? So we need to have discernment in what it is that we're called to do. But oftentimes we get in our heads, or we start looking around, right? We start hearing what other people are saying and doing, and we start believing untrue belief number 2, which is I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. So our first one was I am not enough. Now this one's I'm not doing enough. See how the two, one flows into the next? Because certainly if I was enough and I was doing enough, and then I would have these kind of results that I'm looking for. I would have this growth in my business. I would see these things happening, right? And so in this of effort, again, to make up for this gap that we see. We get back on the hamster wheel, right? And we get really distracted by every little thing, thinking maybe this is the secret sauce, right? But God says, you don't have to do it all. Just because someone else is doing it or says that you should or you think you should doesn't mean that it's yours to do, right? What am I calling you to? Which is why it's really important that we're setting that time with him and we're paying attention to what we're giving our time to. Because there are things we're giving our time to that we're actually writing down. Maybe it's written on a calendar or a to-do list or something like that. But there are a lot of things we gave our time to in the last 24 hours that weren't written anywhere, but we still gave it time. So we have to be aware through that audit of where our time is going and then start sorting that list. And that's where we came into what can be deleted, right? What doesn't matter? What's not a best yes for me right now? What can be delegated? What could someone else do? It doesn't only have to be on my plate. It probably could or should be done, but I'm not the only person. What can be delayed because right now this is not my best yes? And then what is the delight that God has called me to that's leading me to the fruit that he's calling me to? Okay, so those are the things that we've talked a little bit about. But again, we just said the problem is not in the knowing of all of those things. It is still a process because we're always in our flesh going to keep coming back to the I'm not enough and I'm not doing enough. Right? But we want to get into the doing. So if you're here for doing, drop doing in the chat, okay? Because we not only want to do these things, but we want to do it with consistency, right? We want to do it with consistency because when we have inconsistency, what are our results? A lot of randomness, a lot of who knows what, a lot of woo woo, the roller coaster, right? I was thinking about this morning. Have you ever been where you've had this amazing month in your business and then followed by that, you had like a not even on the radar month. And then maybe it was kind of down here for a while. And then you had this amazing peak. And then, so often we're on this roller coaster of up and down in results, up and down in focus and distraction, up and down in our intention interruptions, right? We're like this all the time. And we're wondering, why is it that I'm on this roller coaster? Why is it? And I don't know, when you think about roller coasters going up and down and up and down, it takes more effort to get momentum going back up again than if it would just, when those roller coasters, I don't know if anybody loves roller coasters. I can't do them as much at this age, I find. I don't quite feel good when I get off of them, but it kind of the momentum, like coming down one of those hills helps it go up the next one, right? So there's not actually a whole lot of power that's going out. It's the momentum that's happening, right? But what happens if one of those gets stuck at the bottom? It's going to take a whole lot of push to get it back up again, right? And so often as entrepreneurs, as solopreneurs, we're like, stop, start, stop, start, stop, start, right? And it's like this, and it's really exhausting. And, that was really what I experienced when I was in my first business because, I would push, I'd be focused, I'd have this really great intentional month, but then I was exhausted. And then I would take this breather, right, for a few weeks, only to have to oh, wait, it's like halfway through the month and I've got some goals I want to hit. And so then trying to get back into, crazy hamster roll. And I was really doing a lot of things out of desperation or duty or distraction. And it was very inconsistent. So I'm curious for those of you who are on live, for you guys just to help me kind of get in your head and in your world, in your calendar a little bit. What is it that often leads to inconsistency for you? What is it that often leads to inconsistency for you? Is it not knowing what to do? Is it something in the doing of it? Is it something inside of you? Is it something external outside of you? I would love to hear. And I'm sure there, are a whole bunch of reasons. But what are some things that lead to inconsistency for you? Or what's one main thing that, yep, this tends to, when this happens, I'm being inconsistent. Okay, getting caught in perfectionism. Okay, yes, not feeling like doing it. Okay, yes, if I'm going off my feelings, we know our feelings are going to be up and down, right? So not knowing, children being sick or home, yeah, of course, that changes things for sure. Those of us who still have kids under a roof or kids who come home for periods of time or even aging parents we're caring for or spouses or dogs that suddenly, my dog took off during the solar eclipse the other day, and then it was a whole bunch of time to find him literally miles away from our house when we finally caught up with him. Wasn't my plan when those things happen. Yes, when life happens, when there are distractions, right? And a lot of these feel like things that it's easy to point our finger to all these things out here, right? But so often it's really, we need to be looking at in here. We need to be looking at, am I identifying my priorities? Am I planning my priorities? Am I protecting my priorities? right? Because what happens is when we don't, without a plan, right, without knowing what matters, and then having a way to do that, then we let the tyranny of the urgent or the priorities of other people get our time and attention, right? And now they're taking that time and attention, onto something else, and that's why we need to be priorities protectors. We need to know what matters, right? Which hopefully we've started working on that yesterday, and then when I'm giving it time, I need to know in my week, not just I hope this week to get to this. Is hope a very good plan? Right? If you say on Sunday, I hope that I will get this, this, and this done. What are the chances, scale of 1 to 10, that you're actually going to get that done this week? Probably on the lower end, right? You may be successful and be able to get 2 out of those 3 things done, but chances are if it's based on hope, and I hope I get this done this week, then it's probably not going to happen, right? But when we are intentional, then that's going to make a big difference. But that comes down to then what happens when we're looking at our time. I thought this is really interesting. Scheduling time to work on projects or tasks that I want to do. But even if I schedule the time, sometimes I get there and it feels like something else should take precedence. Yes. But here's the thing. I say this often to the girls that I work with. You are the CEO. So you get to decide and discern. Maybe just because you had a plan going into the week or into the day or even into the next, time in your day does not mean that it can't change. So discerning, is this a divine invitation? Is this something that God is saying, you know what, this is what needs your attention right now? Or is this just an interruption? Is this something that's a distraction? Is it something that's just going to take me away? Does this have to be done in the moment? I think that's a great question to ask too, right? Because something comes in and what happens? We feel like if I don't take care of this now, right, I'm going to forget, or it's not going to happen, or whatever that is. So discerning, is this a right now thing? Or is this something that I can assign it to a different time so I can keep my focus with what was already in front of me? So that can be something that can help you. And it's going to be that's, again, slowing down our yes when things come across our path into what that looks like. And sometimes you're right. Sometimes we just allow ourselves, right, to be distracted. Sometimes it's a little bit more work and we want to do the easy thing or the thing that feels good, right? Or yes, I think it'll just take a minute. So I'm just going to quick do this right now, right? Well, guess what? If it's going to take a minute right now, it'll probably take a minute, when you're done with whatever you were planning to focus on. So I always like to have a notebook or my Post-its next to me on my desk. That way I can jot those things down, right? Because just a minute doesn't turn into just a minute. I can't tell you how many times I would say, I just have to do one more thing. And then 30 minutes later, I'm finally coming out of my office or closing my computer because now I'm finally done with, whatever it was. So, okay. So let me look and see where we're at, because I'm having fun over here in the chat. Okay. So our problem is that without a plan, we let the tyranny of the urgent or the priorities of others get our time and attention, right? So we're all over the place and we're doing random things at random times for random reasons, and we're inconsistent. And we end up wasting a lot of time, energy, and resources because of all that. So the question is, how and when do we give time to what matters so that we don't feel like we don't have control of our time and the things that matter are getting our time? Okay. It's a great question. How do we, follow through on these things that we say matter? How do we follow through and do the things that we know that God has called us to do? But first, we always have to check our beliefs around our time. Okay. What are some thoughts that you often have around your time? I'd love to, those of you who are on live, drop them in the chat. What is something that you say, maybe you're out loud or maybe to yourself, that relates to the time that you have or that you think you don't have? What is something that often crosses your mind or sometimes crosses your mind, or maybe you just heard somebody else say, right? Because of course we have no issues with this. There's not enough time. Okay. I don't have enough time. Time goes too fast. Yeah. Where did the time go? What happened to the time? If I had time, when I had time, there's never any time left over. I can't seem to find the time, right? All of these things are related to untrue belief number 3, which is I don't have enough time. Yeah, or I'll do it another time, or I'll do it another day, right? There's not time today for it. Great noticing of those things. They all come around, essentially, the untrue belief, I don't have enough time. Okay, and for those of you who've been with me the last couple of days, we've been using the steer belief map to see where do these thoughts steer us. So when I'm believing that I don't have enough time, right? And I'm looking at, my calendar, I'm looking at my to-do list, right? And my thought is, I don't have enough time. What are you feeling? For me, it's panic, anxiety, overwhelm. I start feeling this like rushedness, I feel like, again, I'm running to catch up. And then what's our execution? Oftentimes we're trying to fit more into a small space, right? We increase the pace, we go faster, we multitask, we have multiple tabs, we're up late, we're cutting out the things that matter. We're not taking the time to rest like we need to, or to move our body like we need to, and things like that. And the result is I don't have time for it all. I don't end up having all of that. Yeah, usually we're hurried and a poorer quality. You're right. Like when I'm hurried and rushed and feeling like I have to catch up with this, I'm usually making mistakes, or I'm dropping balls, or I'm, because I'm in such this kind of a mode, right? But here's what I love. God showed this to me a couple of months ago, and I keep coming back to this. Oh, yes, frustrated and impatient with others. So true, right? Because if you already feel like you don't have much time, what happens when someone else interrupts you? Watch out, right? Mama bear claws come out, because you're taking away my precious time, because it's something I have to control, because I don't have enough. And so I don't have enough, to share with you. And not, we don't always say that, but sometimes, again, check your spirit, right? When you think you have time for something, you're about to give time to something and it gets interrupted. Again, discern, is this an interruption or invitation, a distraction or invitation? But oftentimes it's that, what am I feeling? Am I really holding on like this is mine, or am I willing to be open-handed with it? So when I was reading a couple months ago in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, he was talking about the context of giving and giving your money. And there's so many parallels. Kimberly is on here today, and she's a financial coach. And so she and I have had this conversation. She's been on my podcast. We talk about there's so many principles that parallel the use of time and the use of money, right? Because they're both resources, right? And so the context of this comes from talking about giving of our money, but I think the same can be true of how we view and give our time. And here's what it says in 2 Corinthians 9, 8 through 11. It says, "And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all that you need at all times, you may abound in every good work." Right? Like when he gives me all that I need to do what he has called me to. We talked yesterday about the work he has called us to. We talked Monday or Tuesday, day one, about the work that he has called us to. And then I love how it goes on to say this: "He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness." Right? Even when I feel like my time is so little, when I am investing it in what matters and what he's called me to, right? He brings that exponential growth. We talked about the parable of the soils yesterday, right? Or actually, I was having this conversation with somebody else. I'm sorry, it wasn't part of this, but we were talking about how when our heart is ready, that seed can go in. And if you know the parable of the soils, it has 30, 60, 100-fold, because God brings that kind of growth, right? And then it goes on to say, "You will be enriched in every way, to be generous in every way, which will produce thanksgiving to God." Right? So instead of complaining about my time that I don't have enough, it's going to actually produce thanksgiving in my heart and in the hearts of those who got to benefit from the time and the way that I spent it. So if we're coming from that truth, instead of the fact that I only have 24 hours in a day, right? But God's given me 24 hours in a day. Now I can look at my time and believe that he has given me not only what I need, but more, and that he will increase the results, which are going to lead to what kind of feelings? Peace, trust, right? I'm going to be able to slow down and like pause first and ask and listen and prioritize, and then be intentional with a plan, and then use my time wisely, right? And then I can be generous with investing my time in what God has given me to do, and when he has called me to, invite that interruption, and then in trusting that he is going to produce the fruit. So speaking of the one who supplies bread for food, this is really cool. I had an aha during a sermon a couple months ago on this Sermon on the Mount from Matthew 6. And Jesus teaches his disciples how to pray. And if you look at that, the first three requests are very focused on God and building his kingdom. And the second three requests look like they're all about us, but really they're still about him being the one who gives us what we need to build his kingdom, right? It's about right eating, which is give us our daily bread, right relationships, which is give us forgiveness, and right direction, give us your leading. So when I looked at that, the last two made sense to me, but not the first one. I was like, okay, I get the right relationships and the forgiveness, because that's directly related to the kingdom. And I get the not going, in a way that's apart from his, but I didn't really get the eating of bread part, right? And here's the thing. Yes, or like in John 15, he is the vine. Yes, and we are the branches. We can't do anything without him. Yes, and how that's so intricately tied together. We talk a lot about that in the with God life, right? But when I thought about the daily bread, I thought, how many of us wake up wondering if we're going to have enough bread for the day? Anybody wake up this morning going, I wonder if I have enough bread today? Or how many of us woke up saying, how can I eat less bread today because I don't need all the carbs, right? Like we're usually going, I have too much, right? But back in that day, they were dependent on daily bread. They needed that to sustain them. And so he was saying, I want you to come to me for what you need every day so that you are seeing this is from me and not what you've done on your own, right? Because they could go get up in the morning and just start, going to gather what they needed to get the grain, to grind it, to make the bread and all of that, right? But he wanted them to have that dependence on him and to see the bigger purpose and how this is building the kingdom, right? So as I'm sitting there, our pastor asked us, what is your daily bread? And I remember thinking like, well, I mean, I'm not asking like, I mean, yes, I need food and things like that. But of course, I'm always thinking about things related to redeem her time. And so all of a sudden I thought, it's my time. My time is what I need daily, right? And I can't, because they needed it every day. It was fresh. It wasn't like, it would last from one day to the next. I can't save up time from yesterday. I'm going to bank 2 hours from yesterday that I didn't use just in case I need it for a rainy day. Anybody ever tried to do that? Doesn't work, right? I can't borrow from tomorrow and say, well, I don't think I'm going to need all 24 hours tomorrow. So I'm going to take a couple from tomorrow and then I can, kind of put all this together here. I can't make any more of it in the present, right? I have to trust him to give me every day, to lay in front of me exactly what it is that I need, which reminded me of manna, right? The people of Israel had to trust that God was going to provide every single morning and he was going to lay in front of them what they couldn't create for themselves. You and I cannot create more time, right? They couldn't create this manna in the wilderness where there was nothing that was growing, right? They couldn't even save up from the day before because what would happen? It would rot. They couldn't save leftovers from today for tomorrow because it wouldn't be good for them. They had to trust that he would make it enough for what they needed that day. And then when it came to Sabbath, they had to trust that what they gathered would be enough for 2 days, even when they didn't think it would be enough, that he would make it enough when they trusted him so they could spend that time worshiping. And so as I thought about that, I thought, do I see my time as a gift that he lays before me every day? Do I rise up with gratitude when I see it? Or am I like the Israelites who complain that it's not what I wanted and it's not enough? Right? They grumbled. And what happened when they grumbled? Like there were consequences. I mean, God was still faithful and continuing to provide for them. But yeah, life was not very happy. Right? But here's the thing, before they could use the manna, before we can use the time, we have to take the time to go gather it, to fill up and to give thanks for it. Right? But when we start with what we have to do, we start with the calendar and we jump into that versus looking at who the time came from, then I think it really shifts, it really changes things for us, right? Because we're just looking at the time rather than the purpose behind it. And it's really going to depend on how we see it. Do we see it as a limited resource that I have to gather up, right? And I have to be like, this is my basket. You can't have any of mine. I've got to keep and protect this, right? Or it's going to get away from me and I'm going to be hungry and not have enough. Or as this abundant gift, right? When they went out, it didn't matter how much this person gathered, how much they were all next to each other gathering, right? And everyone had enough because God made it exactly enough. And they could share back and forth knowing that God was going to make whatever they had enough, right? And he was going to then multiply the outcome of that. And so it reminded me too of the parable of the servants, right? So that one servant, he saw that what he was given by the master as like a limited resource, right? He like wanted to bury it so it didn't get lost or stolen. But the other two servants, they invested it because they knew it wasn't just theirs. They knew who it had come from, and its purpose was to grow his kingdom, right? And so the same thing I think is true of us with our time. How do you want to see time? Do you want to see it as something that you have to chase and control? Or do you want to see it as something that you can receive and invest? There are actually two words for the word time in Greek. And in the English language, we just say time. So everything feels like it means the same, but really there are two different ways, okay? The first one is chronos. Those are like the minutes, the hours, the days, the weeks, those kinds of things, right? That's when, I'm really just, I'm chasing the clock versus the kairos, which are the moments that have purpose, the moments that are bigger than I am, the moments that it really doesn't matter how much time it is or how long it is. There's a sense and a difference of that. Right? So we can either chase time or we can embrace time. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I hope that you would choose one over the other. But drop in the chat, what would you rather do with your 24 hours each day? Would you rather be chasing it all day long, like maybe you have been, or like a lot of people around you are? Or would you rather embrace it? Drop chase or embrace down in the comments. Because it really, really matters, right? How we view it as to then how we use it, right? Because if we see it as something I always have to catch up with and control, and I have to keep, very protected, then I'm going to be, I'm going to be multitasking. I'm going to be, I'm throwing, filling every little nook and cranny, because if I don't, something's going to get away from me. But when I see it as a gift, when I see it as having purpose beyond the moment, right? Now I don't have to be so anxious about it. I can be trusting about that, right? So I want to introduce to you, if you haven't already heard this, some of you have been around Redeem Her Time, and so you know a little bit about how we look at time and then the tools we use around this. But I'm going to introduce you to a time blocking method. But I first want to say this, it's not the same thing that you hear embrace it because you caught up with it. Yeah, sometimes we have to catch our souls up with it so that we can embrace it in the right way, for sure. The way that we hear time blocking often from a lot of time management experts is just a glorified to-do list, right? Put something in every block of your day. Some of us are told, fill every nook and cranny. What can you fit in between things, and so we've got a task in every hour, every half hour, every 15-minute block of our day, right? And then what happens when something runs over or gets interrupted or gets knocked out of a spot? Then we're back running again, right? We're running, we're trying to chase it because it's, because it's now affecting the next thing. And now I feel off and I feel behind in all of that. So what I want to introduce you to is a way of looking at your time that is a bigger picture, kind of like I'm stepping back and getting a 30,000-foot view. I'm looking at your calendar. Well, I think we've all been there, right? Whether we care to admit it or not. Some of us don't write it down. It's just in our heads and we're still doing the same thing. And some of us, I call it like rush hour traffic, right? When one thing gets bumped, then it bumps into everything else. And then you've got this pile up and this mess to clean up and all of that. So I want us to look at our time though with this bigger picture and this bigger purpose of stewarding it with intention, not trying to cram something into everything, like having a spaciousness to it, not, having some white space in there, right? Having some Selah, which is the pause, some Sabbath, which is time that I've set aside to, I'm not producing something. I am, creating or being recreated, like we talked about in our book club that we just got through, right? And the way that I break this down is that all of us have 5 main time blocks in a day. That's where the 2 + 3 comes in, right? 2 + 3 is 5. We can do math, okay? Every one of us, doesn't matter what age or stage of life you're in. It doesn't matter if you're working a business full-time or part-time. It doesn't matter if you have kids at home or out of the house, or if you're married or not married or anything. I believe we all have 5 main blocks in our day. We have 2 refills and we have 3 pour outs. Okay. Now they will look a little bit different in maybe the length and maybe the, exactly how they fit together and things like that. But essentially we should have these 5 different times in our day so that we're thinking about what is it time for instead of the question, what time is it? Because we're asking what time is it? What are we focused on? The clock, right? The calendar. I got to stay ahead of this, right? Versus what is it time for? And that's helping us. Okay. 2 refills and 3 pour outs. Okay, 2 refills and 3 pour outs. Let me explain what they are. We're going to start with the 2 refills. The 2 refills are literally what that is. Refilling your cup, right? Because you can't pour from an empty cup. So this is when we are filling up our body, mind, and spirit, right? This is where it's like your phone. Your phone has to be charged in order for you to be able to use it, right? With anything, that we have, it has to be, you want to be able to give someone a glass of water and you've got a pitcher, you need to fill it up before you can pour out. And the way that I teach it is that our refills happen both before we pour out and after we pour out, right? Before we pour out, because I can't pour from an empty cup. And so what am I filling up with? So there's something to give. And then at the end, yes, I've poured out a lot, today. How can I refill? And then, yes, you can have those Selah moments during the day where you've got little refills that are happening, because sometimes it's like, oh, I need something in the middle of my day, whether it's a quick nap or a walk outside or a worship song or a little dance party or whatever it is, right? So the bookends are the refills, right? This is where I am not focusing on pouring out. I'm not doing laundry. I'm not checking messages. I'm not even scrolling. Okay, let's be honest right now. This device, unless you are very intentional and disciplined because you're only going into your prayer app or your Bible app or whatever that is and nothing else, can get really distracting. And then it's not refilling, right? So in the morning, yeah, what are you picking up before you pick this up? Some of my clients have even like they were using an app and they like took the information off the app and put it in a different location so they didn't have to pick up their phone because they knew if they picked up their phone, what was going to happen? One thing was going to lead to a next, if you give a mouse a cookie, right? And you start having this rabbit trail of where your time starts going. Okay. Same thing at night though. How many of us at night, we are, continuously in front of something that's scrolling or, now it's like you watch a Netflix series and you don't have to get up off the couch to push play on the next episode. It just automatically plays. And then before you know it, hours and hours have gone up, right? You see another email notification, you see someone liked your post, you see whatever, and your brain now gets distracted and you go over there, right? So I want you as best you can to take, devices out of refill times because they are not truly refilling. What is really going to refill your body, mind, spirit? So this is where our CEO time comes, that with God time is going to be really important because we need to fill up with him, especially if we want him to be pouring out of us, right? So that's what we're looking at. The pour outs, the 3 pour outs are where you're called to serve, right? And the way that I break these down, and today I'm just kind of giving you a big overview. Inside the program, we get really nitty gritty and then we like actually lay them out for what it looks like for you. But for most of us, the morning pour out is our family and household. Like what things need to happen for the day to run well and get started. So whether you've got family at home still or a spouse or just things that need to happen in your home or, in your world so that, things are running like they need to before you give your focus to something else. Okay. The day pour out is usually focused on our work or our business. Right. And again, that may look a little bit different because I do work with clients who are also homeschooling kids or who are also working a job and then have a business that they work different hours. So their business time may be, moved around in different places. That's okay. But, this is the work that you're called to do. Right. So whether that's a full-time business or part-time business or full-time ministry or caretaking and things like that. And then our PM pour out is usually when kind of think about the time that people are coming back into the home or you're done with work and you're ready to take, kind of focus on what needs to happen to end the day. Got to feed this body, got to make sure, things are cleaned up, maybe make sure things are prepped for the next day. It's this kind of resettling and bringing things back together, right? And then again, not doing that stuff up until the minute you go to bed, because what happens then you lay in bed and it's really hard to fall asleep and you're not getting the rest that you need. So once you start thinking about your day in those places, today we're really going to focus on the refills, and then we're going to focus on those work focus blocks. But thinking too, like, okay, yeah, if I'm always trying to do household stuff in the middle of my business block, no wonder I'm distracted and I'm inconsistent with what I'm doing, right? Because my time is getting spent lots of different directions. And what happens is then we have this guilt, right? We're just adding more to the mental load and we're multitasking and we're trying to fit it all in. And like someone shared earlier, we're trying to help the kid with homework, we're trying to cook dinner, we're trying to respond back to the client, and we're trying to answer our husband's question, we're probably going to drop a ball somewhere, or probably a couple of them, right? And then it's going to take us more time to go back to that. And that was me for a really, really long time. So inside the Redeemed Life CEO, we build out what your ideal week looks like and where these 5 blocks fit in your day, during your weekday, and then also on your weekends. But I want you just first of all today to be thinking about those refills, especially the one where you are sitting with God to fill up and build your CEO belief, right? Because when we're tempted to jump into our business to-do list and all the appointments we have for the day and all those things, we're going to just be chasing all day long, right? But when we take the time to receive that time, we start building our CEO belief, we start seeing where he's directing us, then that time opens up for us because we're not wasting it on all of the other things. So in our implementation step today, I'm going to ask you to decide when you are going to make time to fill up before you get into the tasks of your day. And think about what kinds of things are you going to do? It doesn't have to be like a rigid routine, but definitely a regular rhythm, right? What are the things that you're doing that? And yes, Kimberly, I love that you brought this up. When we are doing our own business, especially those of us who do something virtually or from home, those lines get blurred, right? Because it's so easy for it to be just one more thing, or well, let me, do this while I'm doing this, or I'm going to come back to this because we aren't like literally clocking out, right? We're not getting in the car and driving somewhere else. So hold on to that thought. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Okay. So, but the first thing I always tell people, no matter how busy you are, is to plan your refill time first. And I know that right now you may think, I don't have time to fill up. But how many of you have ever said it's never time left over for me? Like most of us, that has come out of our mouth or been in our brain at some point, right? In a season of life. And the reality is that we will never find the time. We need to make the time, right? And so those refills are a priority, and they will actually help us to be able to have more focus with the time in between when we're doing those types of things. Okay, so I'm going to encourage you, go there first and decide, when are you going to refill the beginning of your day? When are you going to refill in the end of your day? And what types of things will be refilling for you? So that way, that's what's getting your time and attention. And when you're in one of those refill blocks, guess what? You have permission to tell yourself, this is not time for me to pour out right now. Now, if you have a sick child that all of a sudden comes up, or, there's something going on, of course, we don't just ignore them, right? But most of the time we are not even making time for the refill, and we're just pouring out from the minute we get up to the minute we go to bed, and we wonder why we're exhausted and why we feel like we're going in circles. So that's going to be your first assignment, is to think about when those times are going to be. Okay, now I want to get to what Kimberly mentioned in the chat, and that is your CEO business hours and your non-business hours. Okay, so I've got that section at the top of page 2 for day 3, right? When are you going to work on your business? Those are your CEO business hours. And when are you not going to? When are you going to put up the "we're closed" sign without the guilt? Pet peeve is when it says, "Sorry, we're closed," right? Like, we don't need to apologize that we have decided this is a time I'm not working or I'm not available for this, right? But I think so often we do that. And then, yes, it feels like, well, this will just take a minute, or yes, I just, I'll get to this because I can, or I should, or whatever. And then again, we keep letting those lines blur. Some of the gals who are inside of my program, I love learning from them because they have brick and mortars. So if they want to have a business, what do they have to do? They have to post their business hours, because if they don't, they won't know when to be there, and their customers and clients won't know when to show up, right? And so those business hours are decided ahead of time. And guess what? When they are there in those business hours, they are working their business. They're not changing laundry. They're not, answering all the, paying the bills. They're not doing all these other things. Those are all things that are somewhere else. But you're right, Kimberly, it gets really fuzzy when it isn't a separate place, right? When it is so close, and when things can go, those lines can blur. And in some ways it can be a real blessing, right? Because it gives me flexibility around that. I don't have to be gone and take the time to go do that. But it can also lead towards me just always doing, right? And this was me for a long time. There weren't the really clear lines. And sometimes I can fall back into this, right? I remember back in the day, like, where's mom? Oh, she's in her office again. She's in another meeting. Okay, it's family movie night, but I'm bringing the laptop. Let me just do one more thing and then I'll be there, right? Because I was always trying to get it done and trying to finish my work. But how many of us ever really get to the end of it, right? Like, do you ever really finish it, right? Instead, we're just missing those opportunities in the moments that we're passing by. So here's my question for you. For those of you who are on live and those of you listening to the replay, yes or no, right now, do you have set business hours? Is it clearly defined for you and, probably even the people who live in your home, because they're the ones who maybe need to know the most, especially if you're working from home, when it is that you're working and when it is that you're not? Good. I see some yeses. Okay. Sometimes we set them, but we don't go by them. Sometimes we haven't set them and we're just kind of random all over the place, right? So I'm going to encourage you, if you don't have them right now, that we're going to set them. And if you do have them, that you're going to make sure that you're seeing, are these the best hours for me? And how is this, am I consistently keeping to this? Okay. Sometimes, yes. We're a little random. So how can I be consistent with this? Okay. When do I, and someone's talking about how we have sometimes, we have specific things that are set, but then we have some flexibility. So yes, we have that, but like kind of outside of that, do I have I don't, I'm not taking calls, or I'm not doing work, or I'm not whatever on these other times, right? So what does that look like for you, right? Like, is it that you work during the morning or the afternoon or the evening? Is it that you work on weekdays or weekends, or some of both? Do you work every day? Do you work some days? Do you work all day, part of the day? How many hours a week do you, want to put in that? If you went and worked for a boss, you would be clocking in to your 20, 30, 40 hour work week. And, you would clock out, which means I'm out of here and I'm going to focus on something else. So those of us, especially who have virtual businesses or doing things from home, have to have healthy limits around when we're working and when we're not. And yes, it is okay for a season for it to be a little bit more, a little bit less. To be completely transparent, this week has been more than usual for a lot of reasons, right? But it's for this season for me to be able to serve you guys in this way. And then I have a consistent routine that I will be going back to, right? The key is that we're building consistency. And yes, I love that some of you have done things. Let me read some of the things that are in the chat. Switching hours. So that way you are looking at, when am I working? And when am I not? Sometimes it does have to get worked around the people that we're serving, but very often we can say, this is when I'm available, right? And people can find something inside of there. Okay. And also paying attention to, when do I have kids at home or when do I have a spouse at home and how does that fit in? Is something that we keep in mind. What else do I want to be able to give my full attention to so that I'm not always working, right? Now, easy, silly example is like laundry. Okay, I am that girl. I can't be doing laundry every day of the week or I will feel like I'm never done, right? And I'm always thinking to listen for, is that ringer, is that, buzzer going off and do I need to switch something? Did I remember to fold it? Now I have to put it away. So for me, I like to have laundry kind of like in a set time of my week. So that way, I'm not sitting in front of the laundry watching it spin, right? I can do other household things while that's happening, but I'm not having that ongoing all the time, right? But sometimes, again, we do that with our business where it's always ongoing. So when am I like, okay, shutting this down, closing the computer, walking out of the office and moving on to, whatever else this is, and having flexibility for the times that, today my body just needs to rest or, I just need some extra, space in what's happening. Okay. So the next thing that I find, we're just going to touch on this real quickly. And again, we dive deeper in this in the Redeem Midlife CEO is, okay, so when I do have business hours, say that I do, and I'm being consistent with them, do I know what I'm doing when I sit down? Because what I find is that sometimes we sit down and we're like, okay, great, I blocked this time, but where did I leave off or what should I be doing? And then again, it's onto the shiny object or the first email we open or, and then that can be a rabbit trail that leads us towards so many other things, right? We start going in circles and are not really doing what it is that's really going to move us in the right direction. So CEO weekly focus work blocks, right, are where we are prioritizing the activities that matter and when we're going to do them and give them time. Now, what I love about the way that I teach this is it's all modular. Like you can, normally you might do something on a Monday, but say 1 week you're traveling on a Monday. Well, great, it can move somewhere else, right? But we identify the priorities. We decide, how much time we're going to give them and when. And then we have the flexibility to be able to move them, if we need to, but we're then stewarding that time that we have. So I want you to think about, right, what are some things that need your attention when it comes to your business on a consistent basis? Maybe not necessarily daily, but drop in the chat. Maybe what are 1, 2, or 3 things that need some consistent attention if you want your business to be moving forward? I'll take a minute to catch up on some chat stuff over here while you're doing that. Yeah, so we get to decide, right? If our family needs us, what happens with other things, and that's good. Some of us can tend to bleed the other way, right? Where we're always giving to what someone needs in the moment, and it doesn't always have to happen right at that moment. So having discernment around that is very important. What you're saying is very confirming because I've been trying to be intentional. I feel like I don't get much done in the time, but hoping it will add up over time, right? Yeah, that's oftentimes how we feel, right? But we want, if we identify what are the actions, what are the activities that are going to lead me in a growth direction, then that will help me to give time to them and not just hope that if I do enough of this over enough time, that it's going to get me results. So, okay, what are some things? Newsletters, videos, so I can spend more time during client meetings, coaching. Our community is an important place to be. We're going into writing and reach outs, follow-ups weekly client support calls, Facebook group, answering questions. Okay, need to be more consistent with these different things on social media and posting and things like that. Okay, so what you want to do then is you want to make a list of what are the priorities in my business. And I really believe, and I'm actually working on a resource right now that's going to be going inside the CEO's program of looking at our weekly growth activities. And it's going to look different based on, again, your season of life and your season of business and what your specific goals are. But I think they fall under a couple of main categories. The first is we need to be spending time on a weekly basis building our CEO belief. Now, I believe like daily we should be spending time with the Lord, but you also might be taking a course. You might be, listening to a specific podcast and really being intentional, not just listening while you're doing something else. You might be a part of the Redeemed Midlife CEO, and so you're working on your modules and working on the implementation and things like that. So where are you making time to work on building your CEO skill set? Okay, I think that's an important place. Another one is creating content. Okay, when are you creating content so that there's value going out that's sharing what it is that you're called to serve others with? Now, here's where I think we have to be very careful. I shared this yesterday. I was part of a program at one time where they were teaching us to post 5 times a day. 5 times a day times 7 days a week. That is a lot of content. Like literally your whole life could be spent creating content. Okay, so obviously that is not the right, probably a sustainable amount and not going to give you time for some of these other things. But what does creating content look like for you? What does that look like? What's the amount for you to create that you can be consistent with? But it's not going to be taking time away from other things that needs to be. And again, that could be different from different person to person, right? So like me deciding to go down to one podcast episode is me just focusing my content creation on one of those and the things that go around it instead of two of them. So I can take that time and invest somewhere else. The next category is making connections, right? So how and when are you networking, engaging, showing up where your best client is? When are you making time to go to that group, to go to that meeting, to go to that platform, to go to whatever that is, whether it's virtual or in person, to make real live connections with people and not just post and pray and hope that the right person's going to find you somewhere, right? Because you watch people when they're on their social media, they're just scrolling, and maybe once in a while they'll find a cat video and they'll stop and watch it. But most of the time they're just passing up all that great, valuable content you just put your time into creating because they're just so distracted by all the other things going around them. Okay, so we have building your CEO belief, creating content, making connections. The next one is having conversations, right? Here's where, I'm actually having a conversation, whether I'm meeting with somebody face-to-face over coffee, whether we're meeting over Zoom, when am I making time for that? And this is one thing I had to get really specific about because I couldn't open up times in my calendars every day of the week, or I was getting distracted from some of these other things. So I have like really specifically put Tuesdays and Wednesdays are those conversation times where people can book something on my calendar because I needed to stay focused on my content creation on Monday and on my client service, which is the last category, serving your clients and customers on Thursday. And then Friday is kind of my, catch-all projects, what things do I need or want to work on that day. So, so thinking about, this doesn't have to be every day, but what would this look like? Where am I intentionally putting time? And like I said, that last one is serving clients and customers. When are you directly doing things that are benefiting those people who are working with you? And when we give specific time to these, some of these may be happening one time a week and you give it a chunk of time. Some of these may happen a couple different days and they have a smaller piece of time, but thinking about what is it that you need, what time of day is best, what time of week is best, how much time. Sometimes 30 minutes at a time is not enough to really get the creative juices flowing or really kind of be in that mode. So maybe you make some bigger blocks of time, but thinking through where do these priorities happen, okay? So I want you thinking about what are activities need my regular time and attention, and when am I committing to do them so they will get consistency? Right. And if you find that something is always getting dropped or always getting missed or not happening, it's a great opportunity. Whenever you're noticing something isn't working, push pause. Because what happens if we keep doing the same thing over and over? The definition of insanity, right? We keep getting the same results. So if something doesn't feel like it's working, then we pause and we reflect. Also, when you're coming up on a transition, whether it's a transition of a season, so maybe it's coming up to summer, you've got kids coming home from college, or you've got kids that are in school that will be out of school, or you've got more travel happening, or maybe a season of taking care of someone that you haven't been, or maybe a season of your own wellness that needs something, or a project you're working on. Reevaluate what's working, what's not working, what are the needs I have in this season. And that's something that we work through when we do that find the time audit, which I'll talk about here in just a minute. But I want to answer this question real fast because I saw this pop in as we were going through those 5 categories. Alyssa, are you saying that you should have client hours outside of the hours you create content? You don't schedule calls during content creation time. Well, guess what? My first thing is going to be, you get to decide because you are the CEO, right? You decide what works for you. But here's what I found. When I was constantly having to stop the content creation to do the client calls, right? I was distracted. It takes time to they actually say every time you get distracted, it takes 20 minutes to get back on focus. So whether that was I just quick answered, a notification on my phone, or I stopped project I was working on to have this phone call and then go back to it, it's going to take up more of our time. So what I like to do is say, where do I need focus time when I don't want to have to stop start? So things that need my creative juices flowing, things that need more of my deeper focus and concentration, I'm going to make sure that I'm not allowing other things in that time, right? Then yes, are there times then where, I'm open to having people book a time on here. And so then either I'm not planning to do something else, so I'm not feeling interrupted, or I work on kind of lighter things where I can kind of pick them up, put them down as needed, to be able to be in and out of conversations if there are little gaps in between. So yeah, it's kind of your expectations going into that. What needs my deep focus? What is it that, that I can, maybe kind of put up and put down, or I can do in a smaller chunk of time and take some calls in between. So, but you get to decide, see what's working for you. For me, it wasn't working to take calls 5 days a week. I was getting really frustrated. I was getting really distracted, and things weren't getting done that need to get done. And so I had to say, okay, I'm only going to offer times on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. But guess what? I'm the CEO. So if I want to book someone for a Thursday, I get to decide, right? And that's an intentional choice that I'm making versus waking up to an email and going, well, I guess I'm not going to get my content creation today done, or I guess I'm not going to work on my client work because somebody booked a call and I wasn't expecting that. So yeah, that could be a really helpful thing. I love this. I doubt if there's ever a 20-minute time during my day that I don't get distracted by a squirrel. Yes, shiny object, squirrel, or whatever, right? We talk about distractions inside the Redeemed Midlife CEO. First of all, a lot of them are in our control. What things can I do in my environment, to make sure I'm limiting that? So whether that's not bringing certain things into the room with me, whether that's turning off certain things, whether that's just deciding. Maybe you set a timer. I love the Pomodoro method for something that doesn't need a big chunk of time, but smaller chunk of time, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. I work on this one thing. When the timer goes off, then I can check whatever that is. Then I can go change laundry. Then I can, whatever that other thing is. But so most things that come in, especially via our devices, are not emergencies. Now, if my husband calls, I will definitely screen that call, or my daughter, or my mom, or something like that. Like I will make sure that do you need something right now? If not, can I get back to you when this is finished? But most things coming in here are not emergencies and are just going to take time away from what it is that's important. Okay, lots of stuff happening, and we are the time that we are wanting to be here, because I want to make sure to honor your time. Here's what I want you to walk away with, right? How am I viewing my time? Am I seeing it as something I have to control and I'm chasing it all day long? Or am I waking up, looking to the giver of the gift, receiving that gift, and asking him where to steward this today, where to invest it today, how I can be present to what it's time for, instead of always asking, what time is it? And it starts making the shift. A lot of my goal this week has been first to help you with the belief shift, right? In the way you're looking at something, the way you're believing something, the way you're thinking about something, because then when that shift happens first, then you can pick up the time management tool. You can pick up the calendar, the to-do list, the time block, and it's going to be a whole different outcome because you've got the right belief around what was going into it. And so I hope that this is kind of whet your appetite for, how this can be different when I don't just jump right into my calendar. I don't jump right into my to-do list. I look at what's going on in here first and what God's called me to and what he says is true. And then that overflows into how I use the time he's given me, how I invest it in the people he's called me to serve, whether it's in my life, whether it's in my business, in my family, my community, and those types of things. There are a lot of things, and there are a lot of squirrels, and we could be chasing them all day long. And we don't want to have to keep checking the clock, right? All day long. So tomorrow, when you come back, we're going to talk about how listening to his voice really makes all the difference in the time we waste and the energy we waste and the resources we waste when we are running and chasing other things. And I'm going to take you right into scripture about, really interesting passage that's very easy for us to pull this one verse that I'm going to share with you out of context about hearing that voice behind us that tells us, where we should go, whether we turn to the right or to the left. But you look at the bigger picture and what he was telling us. It's really beautiful on how all that pairs together with what we've been talking about this week and all the should do's that are in front of us on a daily basis. So make sure that you pop back in tomorrow for that. Okay, your CEO implementation action step before we go is simply this. I want you to plan your CEO business and non-business hours. When are you working and when are you not working? Right. And I want you to, sit down and kind of look at, what is that going to look like for you? And you've got those blocks, if that's helpful to use those on that front page of each day. And then underneath, start thinking about what CEO growth activities are you going to put there? Are you going to have focused days or focused times of day so that certain things are getting your attention on that day? Maybe there's some things that need to happen more than once a week. Right. And so like keeping up with an inbox, right? If we only do that once a week, it's going to take a ton of time, but we don't have to do it once an hour either. Right. So maybe that could fit in, 1 hour each day where I check in with all my inboxes that are needing me. So that may be something that you see reoccurring, but some things that maybe I give this a bigger focus block and it's only going to happen on one day or maybe 2 afternoons or something like that. So I want you to start kind of laying that out after you've decided first, what are your business and your non-business hours, right? Because that's going to be really important. And when are you having your CEO meetings, right? We talked about that earlier, your refills. When are those happening? So a couple different things there. That's because that's part of our building our CEO belief. So I will make sure that gets on the implementation post inside the community, redeemhertime.com/community. And as you're looking at your time today, instead of feeling like you're behind, because it's easy to be like, I'm behind. I don't have enough time, right? If I have time, when I have time, there's never enough time. I've even struggled with some of those thoughts popping up this week as I felt like there's been a lot of things needing my attention and only so much time to do it. And the best thing we can do in those moments is to pause, to say, what does he say is true? He's given me this gift of time. How can I steward it, invest it in what's going to produce growth, not only in my life and business, but also for the kingdom? And then trust that he's going to make it enough. Even when we don't feel like it is, even when you go to bed and not everything got done, it's okay. It is okay for the work not to be done, for you to refill and to rest, because without that, we're missing those moments that are out there. So thanks for being here today. I loved hanging out with you guys and all the interaction that was going on in the chat today. Looking forward to seeing you guys tomorrow at the same time for our open house, and then on Saturday morning for our Q&A and implementation. So have a fantastic day, and I will talk to you soon.